Why does a 1970s Marantz make your spine tingle while a modern Class D amp barely raises an eyebrow, even with specs that will blow its grandfather away? Is it just nostalgia speaking? It's a question that cuts to the very heart of what we value in sound reproduction, the amplifier. Humble though it may seem, it is the soul of your hi-fi system. If you've ever sat between a pair of speakers and asked yourself whether today's tech-driven audio gear can really replace the warmth, the weight, and presence of a beautiful vintage amplifier, you're not alone. So let's dig in. Whether you're a lifelong vinyl enthusiast or a curious newcomer drawn to sleek streaming amps, understanding this divide will help you choose your next piece of gear with clarity and maybe even challenge what you think you love about sound. In this video, I cover the allure of vintage and modern amps, the sound signatures, the practical considerations, price to performance, sweet spots. So watch till the end for some solid examples. Walk into any serious audio forum or vintage shop and you'll hear names like Sansui, Macintosh, Marantz, or Luxman uttered with almost religious reverence. But what is it about these decades-old machines that captivates us? Point-to-point personality. Many vintage amplifiers were hand-wired or built with discrete components. Heavy iron, real power, large toroidal or iron core transformers, and substantial power supplies delivered current with muscle, with warmth and nuance, key for those dynamic swings and speaker control. The tube sound legacy. Even solid-state vintage amps often aimed to emulate tube-like warmth with Class AB designs and generous biasing. Definitely the aesthetic charm. Brushed aluminum faceplates, glowing VU meters, real wood side panels. These were built as heirlooms, not disposable tech. Still, there are trade-offs. Noise floor, they were often higher. Efficiency, not exactly their strength. And reliability, after 40 years, well, capacitors age, switches corrode, and solder joints fatigue. Buying vintage almost always means budgeting for refurbishment or learning to do it yourself. This lack of reliability can be frustrating for audiophiles seeking a stable, hassle-free experience. Enter the modern amplifier. From minimalist Class D integrated units to smart streaming all-in-ones, today's gear often leaves vintage amps in the dust on paper. Lower THD, higher signal-to-noise ratios, thanks to modern silicon and digital signal processing, distortion levels and noise floors are minuscule. Sometimes so low they're beyond audible thresholds. Compact and cool Class D amps, which are all analog by the way, and hybrid digital designs generate less heat and consume less power, allowing for smaller footprints and whisper quiet operation. Features galore: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USB DACs, room correction, and app control, none of which were even dreamed of in the 70s. Longevity and consistency. Surface mount components, CNC assembled boards ensure tight tolerances and repeatable performance, though they're often harder to repair or modify. Also, the stereotype that modern Class D amps sound clinical or thin is rapidly fading. Amps from Wyred for sound, like the ST500 or the STI 1000, demonstrate that Class D technology can deliver sound that is equally full-bodied and tonally rich as vintage amplifiers. These modern Class D amps marry the best of both worlds, efficiency and neutrality, combined with warmth and musicality that can truly captivate. This challenges the idea that only vintage gear can provide that lush, engaging sonic character. Still, some listeners who crave a perfect balance of neutrality and sonically pleasing warmth might find the consistent tonal signature of vintage amps more nostalgic but sometimes limiting. For audiophiles who seek variety or who want a sound that won't grow boring over time, modern amps like those from Riga, Chord Electronics, Peachtree Audio, or Wyred Sound offer compelling alternatives. An engaging sound with fresh, dynamic edge. So let's talk about sound signature, which is the real test. Here's where specs hit the wall. The amplifier's voicing, how it handles transient response, harmonic structure, and dynamic contrasts, they matter more than just distortion numbers or frequency response charts. Vintage amps, particularly those from the golden eras like the Pioneer SX 950, the Luxman R1040 or 1070, presented a rounded, full-bodied signature. Instruments seem to breathe, voices have chest, transients are a touch softer, but textures feel more tactile. However, this very warmth and character that enchants many can also, for some listeners, become a sonic straitjacket. Over time, the vintage sound can feel predictable or even dull for those craving more neutrality or sharper dynamics. Modern amps, especially those tuned with neutrality in mind, or innovatively designed ones like the Chord's T-Toby, often deliver crystal clear separation, punchy dynamics, and fast transient response, all while maintaining tonal richness. This amp reveals microdynamics that vintage amps might gloss over. But there are amps like Peachtree's Nova 150 that can also expose flaws in recordings or systems mercilessly. Now, let's talk about reliability and maintenance, which are practical considerations. When dealing with vintage amps, recapping, cleaning parts, rebiasing, sourcing new old stock parts are all part and parcel of the journey. For many, me included, this is part of the charm. A physical, hands-on relationship with gear that rewards patience. But the downside is real. Vintage amplifiers can suffer from inconsistent performance and unexpected failures due to aging components and materials. For audiophiles who value a balance of performance and reliability, this can definitely be a significant downside. Modern amps are more plug and play, but can be less serviceable. When something breaks, repair costs can be prohibitive, especially for those digital integrated units with proprietary boards. Yet, there are brands known for their consistent reliability. These often appeal to users who want to focus on listening, not tinkering. Now let's talk price to performance. Where is that sweet spot? Vintage prices have skyrocketed, especially for well-known models. What was $200 at a garage sale find 10 years ago might now sell for $1,000 plus in good condition. All that being said, a properly restored vintage amp like the Accuface E202 can outperform many gear many times its price if it pairs well with your system. Modern amps, on the other hand, offer excellent performance to cost ratios in the sub 1000 space. Brands like NAD, Cambridge Audio, Yamaha, and boutique builders like Peachtree Audio and Wyred for Sound make stellar integrated amps that compete far above their price point and without the need for restoration or constant upkeep. So what's the verdict? Which one is best? There is no objective answer, only context. You want warmth, character, and emotional engagement, and don't mind the hands-on maintenance work? Vintage gear can become an addictive hobby. Do you prefer clean lines, precision, reliability, and convenience with streaming and modern features? Go modern, especially with advanced Class D amps like those from NAD or Peachtree. They can defy that clinical stereotype. Looking for the best of both worlds? Consider hybrid paths, modern amps with full-bodied voicing, or pairing a modern Class D power amp with a tube preamp stage like the Rogue Audio Sphinx. The soul of sound is in the synergy. At the end of the day, amplifiers don't exist in isolation. The magic happens in the system, how your amp interacts with your speakers, which interact with your room, your source, and most importantly, your ears. Whether you choose a glowing Marantz from 1974 or a sleek Class D amp from today, let your taste, not just tech equipment and specs, guide your decision. Because ultimately, the best amplifier isn't the one with the lowest distortion or the most amount of watts per channel. It's the one that makes you listen longer and feel deeper. Being a vintage amplifier and tube enthusiast myself, I have been smitten with this Chord power amp. It's been a permanent fixture in my main reference system for a while now. Here is also a playlist of amp reviews, Class AB, Class D, that might serve you well if you're on the market for a modern amp.